Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. Today, I'd like to share a journey that I am beginning. I hope that it can help many people who are also considering such a move. And it's not only for those who are bipolar or schizophrenic or, one of the major biggies. There are millions of people today worldwide who are on psychiatric medications. And it's one of the scariest things to commit to, getting off these medications. And that is because the reports of psychiatric drug withdrawal are terrifying, and they're real, and they're documented by many people who are open and willing to share this information. Thank goodness. There is very little information that you can get from any doctor because they're not trained to get anybody off the medications because of the biomedical model. I'm willing to now take this on, and I think COVID has a lot to do with this ultimate decision that's going to quite possibly change the course of my life. When COVID entered our world, I was beside myself. New York was the first state hit, and my hometown of New Rochelle had brought it in. It became the first hot zone of the country. If I make it through this year alive, I thought, changes to my life needed to be made because I would have been given a third chance at living. My psychiatric sentence was given to me at 22 years of age. I've been laced on psychiatric medication for 27 years. I'm now 50 and I've had it. I'm letting them go for good. It's going to be a process, but after a lifetime of the alternative as a big pharma drug addict, I'm embracing this challenge with a calm expectancy and an open heart. I mourn for the life I would have had if they offered compassion instead of drugs as the first course of treatment for a mental breakdown resulting from trauma. I never imagined this would have been the life I lived after graduating college. I saw myself growing up as gifted. I was a bundle of energy from the start, with a full and lively personality, a bright star to be, singing and dancing for my family as early as 3 years old. I was beyond intelligence, had lots of friends, and my creative talents were obvious to others and taken as simple, objective truth. I had been top of my class, was an honor student throughout school, and earned a scholarship to college. I was a star actress in musical theater, an exceptional artist, and after achieving a college degree with a dual major, I graduated cum laude. I always considered my brain throughout my entire life to be top of the line and my genes a cut above the rest, until the experts on mental illness and mental health told me otherwise. After my failure of a trip to India in 1994, the high priests of psychiatry told me what to think of my brain from then on. I had suffered an acute illness, disabling and life-threatening, almost died, and subsequently had a true near-death experience on my plane ride home. A mental meltdown from this trauma was normal. But when I landed in a psychiatric hospital and they decided what was wrong with me, they prescribed to me a lifelong regimen of brain medication. That was impossible to get off of from then on. As soon as I got on the meds, all my memories about India had begun to fade. When the antipsychotics dull your racing thoughts, it also triggers amnesia of emotional memories. So the medication had eliminated from my memory the depth of the pain, but the goal of brain meds is not to help you work through the trauma, but to simply suppress it in your unconscious. After being classified a mental case, I began early on to understand how the psychiatric medical establishment was not in the business of health. They were in the business of sickness, and the pharmaceutical industry only wanted customers. Big Pharma has been funding studies to prove their primary business model of biological psychology for decades. The news, the studies, the research flooding in all over the internet for years supporting the biomedical model is inaccurate, inconclusive, and not scientific. It's funded by one industry to keep us forever dependent on their drugs. Biological theories telling people they need their medication are used to support forced drugging, and the phrase lacking insight as proof of a symptom in a person's records can be just the patient disagreeing with the psychiatrist who calls them sick. And sometimes spiritual states of consciousness, nonconformist beliefs, and trauma-induced communication is part of this lack of insight, which should not be treated as diseased but respected with compassion and listened to. Over the course of time, the psychiatric institution created a world for me where my family, friends, and medical team became the main directors of my life. They were assigned the task of watching for my abnormal activities, wants, and drives, and were instructed to make sure I took my meds no matter what. But the medication they forced upon me made me physically fatigued and mentally comatose. My dreams of being a Broadway actress were squashed because my once very expressive and animated nature was eradicated under the drugs. On the meds, my artistic talent was dying a slow death as well. They annihilated every ounce of creativity I had, and my very imaginative essence was being systematically stripped away as they helped me live a normal, average lifestyle like everybody else. Living a normal lifestyle can be soul-crushing for a passionate bipolar artist. The stuff that makes life worth living for us is inside those wandering states of mad inspiration that allow us to create art with our minds and then translate it through our mediums. In order to achieve something beautiful, the artist benefits from less scheduled time and more time alone wandering around their homes, talking to themselves and looking crazy. It is a process, and all of us have different ones, but they are all alike in that they all can be accessed through a commitment to inspiration, which is eradicated on the meds. Many people, especially creative bipolars, risk getting off the meds themselves to return to a better life with moments of brilliance. But because it is dangerous to do so, a life off the meds isn't even imaginable. Once a person goes on these brain meds, if they try to remove themselves, they are more likely to suffer from what looks like the symptoms the drugs were trying to suppress to begin with. But these are withdrawal symptoms, because nobody needs their drugs. When I remember those early days in my 20s, I thought it would have been better if I had died on that plane ride home from India, because this new brain they gave me that was a result of their drugs was appallingly pathetic compared to the one I was born with. And yet I had no choice but to remain on them for years because mental illness treatment plans can be enforced if the doctor deems it necessary. And noncompliance not only goes in your permanent record, but also has potential for an actual court hearing, which I was also threatened with later on down the line. This medical institution that claims it is for my mental health gave me a disability by prescription almost 3 decades ago. I had barely tolerated the slew of drug cocktails that were prepared with a maraschino cherry just for me. The side effects were debilitating, with everything from dry mouth, slurred speech, restlessness, tremors, inability to read, and chronic fatigue. The drugs had successfully molded me into a full-fledged imbecile. The delightful antipsychotic I was first prescribed, Haldol, was to suppress psychosis, but the drugs emotionally tranquilized me, creating a black heaviness around my thoughts, making it impossible to express myself verbally with the slightest bit of inflection. I basically couldn't react to my world emotionally, since I could barely talk, and the meds mentally numbed me, which shaved away the edge from my personality. The antipsychotic Risperdal, or risperidone, which is used to treat bipolars, schizophrenics, and autistic children, was so deadening to my intellect that I might as well have gone back to nursery school and learned how to read again from square one. I remember my mother during this time gave me her thick copy of the dense Anna Karenina. I read this one when I was depressed, she said. But when I leafed through it, my mind was so deadened by the meds that I could barely get through the first paragraph. An English major in college. Now this book seemed to me practically impossible to ever comprehend in this lifetime. The drug caused me to have flattened, dead feelings and a personality wrapped in a straitjacket. Cogentin was the co-treatment. It's used to treat the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, such as muscle spasms, stiffness, tremors, sweating, drooling, and poor muscle control. So after they create the imbecile, they treat the symptoms the meds have caused. During the time I was on Mellaril, I had strange tics. All antipsychotics are linked to cases of tardive dyskinesia, an often permanent neurological disorder characterized by slow, repetitive, purposeless, and involuntary movements. I couldn't stop my legs from shaking or my head from twitching no matter how much mental attention I gave it. Then there was the lovely, highly toxic lithium, their favorite drug of choice for bipolars. The drug creates a feeling of nothingness, which makes it difficult to think, much less be creative. I was the least creative in my life during the time I was on lithium and the most depressed, and I also suffered neurological effects from the drug's toxicity and had a postural tremor in my hands, which made it impossible for me to paint. But the drugs felt it was worth it because my illness was being treated. The cognitive effects were abysmal. I had slowed reaction times, impaired memory, and a mind of blackness. Naturally, dysphoria set in. As the meds disabled me, I had to let all those dreams of working professionally in the arts go. In my 20s, the formative years of my adulthood, while I appeared mentally disabled on bad meds, my peers were experiencing personal growth and achievement in their fields, confident in launching their lives with the belief that they had the capacity to make their way in the world, feeling safe with a dream for tomorrow. On my end, the meds caused my regular interaction with the world to be an inadequate embarrassment. I despised ingesting these chemicals for causing such grief in my life. I longed to perform, but the new medication sedation simply would not let me. I humbly left theater, and my life soon changed into one with no passion nor ability to become the artist I was meant to be, which was encoded in my DNA. I decided to go into teaching, a field I had no desire to pursue, but my creative edge was dulled and obliterated, so I needed to do something. And that is when I was moved to the anticonvulsant Depakote, which is also used to treat epilepsy. I had to worry about liver toxicity at that point and had monthly blood work for years to keep my doctor abreast of my levels. During this time period, because there was no generic drug yet for Depakote, I was forced to spend over $200 a month on meds, which made each pill about $7, so that I could be like everyone else. This mind-numbing medication stimulates an internal time clock, which makes it easier to adapt to schedule time, all the while killing an artist's need for inner spatial freedom within which to operate in a timeless creative state. I gained a handsome amount of weight while on Depakote, while I walked through my day in a lethargic movement with a slowness of thought. The drug deadened my cognitive acuteness. My memory was weak as ever, and it ruined my ability to commit full attention to anything. Right now, I'm on the mood stabilizer also used for epileptics, Lamictal, and the antipsychotic Seroquel. They tell me it helps bipolars sleep. No major side effects, but no major emotional depth either. It may be the least harmful that I've been on throughout my life, so that's why I've stayed on them. I don't want them involved with lowering my dosage and watching me and seeing how it goes. I've been on these drugs now longer than I've been off them in my life, but my future has to be different. In 2016, after enormous stress relating to a marriage separation, I ended up in the hospital again. They switched my working medicine of Lamictal to two older meds to which my body had not previously reacted well, Depakote and risperidone. I had no choice in this decision, so again, forced drugging. It had been 10 years since they last tried to change meds on me. After the switch, my mind was put on slow-mo, and I couldn't believe how right I had been about them. They had successfully made me an average thinker with their effective medicine. But this time, unlike when I was 22, I was painfully aware of this reality, because now I saw through the bullshit. In trying to slow down my thoughts, the medicine, in actuality, took away my abilities to use my talents. My mind had been on turbo, making progress on my book only months prior, and as soon as the meds did their job, I was no longer a writer. I recorded no writing on my home computer or website between mid-January of 2016 until mid-March, when the medication switch occurred back, because I couldn't think. Meanwhile, prior to this obscene intrusion upon my life and changing my medication, I had done another revision of my book within 5 weeks, which included 5 brand new chapters that are still included in the final copy. During those 3 months on the bad meds, I had barely a couple of journal entries, and it took me all day to compose one email. I must have been a goddamn Einstein bipolar genius to have worked as a high school English teacher in Westchester under these meds long ago. Or that just shows you how cognitively impaired our school system is. As soon as I could, I enrolled my prior psychiatrist to get me off the Depakote and risperidone and back on Tillamictal. I only knew what to do because I happened to have decades of experience with meds. My psychiatrist had asked me to keep a log during the transition. The following is straight from an email. New meds regimen beginning on March 17, 2016. March 18th. Immediately, I felt a difference on the morning decrease of risperidone from 4 milligrams to 2 milligrams. A heavy constriction lifted from my brain, and I could think about small tasks needing to get done that I had been putting off. I also felt I could speak a little more quickly at my usual pace, without such concentrated effort. I came out of hopeless to hopeful overnight. Depression setting in for months quieted down. March 19. Today was a bit better. I began to remember small ways I communicate with my own conscience, like in my using phrasing patterns to make sense of my environment inside my own mind. I think the docs think these are voices, but they are just natural ways we all remind ourselves to do things. On the meds, this is shut down. March 20th. Today I was actually able to work on the synopsis part of my book proposal draft, which I was not even able to read through on the prior meds dosage. I completed the 3-page document in a fair amount of time and brought it to final copy. This level of cognitive concentration has begun to be restored. March 21st. 3 days of change in meds, and it is getting easier to make flowing sentences without pressurized speech when talking to people again. I can fully hear my own thoughts again. March 22nd. Had trouble concentrating today with finer details in my work, losing stride, still finding it extremely hard to break out of sleep mode. Since I've come home from the hospital, every morning I've had my parents call me all morning until I finally can rise out of bed. March 23rd. My brain activity is plateauing again. I can't hold the information of the work I need to do inside my head at the same time as the menial tasks I need to accomplish during the course of the day, and find myself stopping dead in my tracks, unable to do either. My productivity mode is freezing up again. I can't think that quickly, and I lose concentration after working for only a little while on a project. I need more brain space for all the things I need to do right now. My anxiety is acute because of this. March 24th. Today was okay. I was a little less in a fog and was able to clean up one of my workspaces, but wasn't able to concentrate on my work. I'm looking forward to getting my old brain capacity back. I need it to move forward. Sad, because on a good day, I was able to clean up my desk. How can we as a society allow substances to enter our brains if they create cognitive impotence? What is wrong with this picture? This system is not in the name of mental health. It is breeding cognitively impaired drug addicts. This is no prescription for a mentally healthy society. By committing to this journey finally, I am saying no to them for good, and they won't any longer have power over my life. I need to be authentic here. I never needed any drug from the beginning. If the system wasn't wrapped up with the money generated by the biomedical model, this would never have taken place. My mind would never have become dependent on such powerful substances. Nowhere else in the medical establishment is treatment forced upon someone as in the psychiatric institution. This establishment had abused my brain chemically for decades and created for me a substandard life because of it. But I had no choice but to comply. When dealing with a psychiatric institution, resistance is futile. I've been working on my book that fights this system and broadcasting my point of view for years, and now that this is my 21st episode of my podcast over 2 seasons, I need to put action behind my words because I know they are wrong. I made it through COVID this year, and when the vaccines were being rolled out, I realized, wait, I'm alive. I'm ready for a change. I have true and proven friends around me. I'm stable and content with my life. I have a supportive and flexible work environment. I know how to live a balanced and healthy lifestyle, and I've worked through so much of my trauma from India. I am finally on my own, living the way I wish to, and my son at 14 years old is old enough to understand the possible drawbacks from withdrawal symptoms. And I believe I can bring a better vision into my life, one that brings me my radiant brain back before they made it their own. So it's now time to let go of the meds. I am ready and I'm moving forward, and in order to drop out of the system for good, I must succeed. I have no choice. So how does one begin? In 2005, when I was planning to conceive, I tried then to taper off the meds. I knew I was taking on a huge challenge even then, but I also knew that I needed to be careful with prenatal care, and Depakote was known to cause birth defects, so making the move to taper was essential. My psychiatrist, who was willing at the time to take those steps with me with this process, did go very slow. But the calculations he made were not in alignment with what we now know from people who have compiled patients' anecdotal information on their own tapering process. No studies have been done in this area because the disease-centered model of drug action assumes that psychiatric drugs reverse the problem, the underlying abnormality, giving rise to the symptoms of the disorder. This is closely related to the chemical imbalances argument in neurotransmitters in the brain. Now they go into the genetics of it. But these are belief systems. So the model itself never taught psychiatrists to get anybody off the meds because in their minds, people who are diagnosed cannot live without them. No studies have been done on tapering antipsychotic treatment. That is until now. And I'm thrilled to announce that the latest study in the Schizophrenia Bulletin on antipsychotic tapering is published. And it's in March 2021, called A Method for Tapering Antipsychotic Treatment That May Minimize the Risk of Relapse. And I can't wait to go through it. It's the first ever scientific paper to highlight a gradual approach to antipsychotic medication discontinuation. It shows promise in reducing negative withdrawal symptoms and relapse. Relapse is often the word used if symptoms begin to show again that the drug was prescribed to suppress, such as psychosis. Now, anyone who's been listening to me knows how I feel about psychosis. Psychosis is not considered a disease state in many indigenous cultures. In fact, they see it as spiritual awakening, and it's always been that way for me. It's just that I can't communicate that until afterwards, and nobody listens to me anyway afterwards. So I can only do it through my writing and art, which is great, right? But I'm still on the drugs. So the fact that they are now trying to document information so that a doctor can actually look at it and say, okay, well, this is a study and this can lead me. That is a breakthrough because up until now, we've only relied on patient information and their anecdotes. They all provide plenty of evidence to show how important it is to reduce medication slowly, particularly with antidepressants. People have a lot of trouble getting off of antidepressants. The withdrawal symptoms can last for years. I feel for them, although antipsychotics are just as bad. So we'll see how mine goes. Others in the psychiatric withdrawal circle who offer support for this move suggest the 10% rule, which is you have a dose, you reduce it by 10%, and then the following month, you should give it about at least 3 weeks to a month for the brain to heal. All of these affect the neurology of the brain. So some of the withdrawal symptoms will look like neurological issues, whether it be shaking or there might be, vomiting or brain zaps or any of these types of things might result. Sometimes they're only for a few days, sometimes they're weeks, and sometimes if they last for months, then you might have to get back on a little bit, a higher dose and keep going a little slower. However, towards the very end, I might have to get a compound, liquid compound to eventually get me off, because that's where the problems occur, that last step down, if you do it too drastically. Because basically you're removing the last connection that your body is dependent on. Whatever it is that's keeping your brain pretty much firing a certain way is when it's removed, there's going to be a lot of your brain confusion to work that out. But I do trust the process at this point because there are people who are out there helping. Will Hall is a therapist. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, I believe. He works with people who experience extreme states of consciousness, often referred to as psychosis. He has had his own experience with psych med withdrawal, and he's created a new vision for mental health and treatment through understanding trauma that causes such mental distress. He's also host of Madness Radio, and his harm reduction approach helps anyone down this unknown road. No one knows how it's going to affect them. In his Harm Reduction Guide to Coming Off Psychiatric Drugs, which was published by the Icarus Project and Freedom Center, he writes, "Because each one of us is unique, it's as if we are navigating through a labyrinth, getting lost and finding our way again, making our own map as we go." I guess that's my wish, to make this map for other people. There may be days that I'm having a rough ride, where I want to sleep all day, or where my head is so dizzy I can't lift it, or I might get stuck on my shamanic journey a little too long again. And hopefully now that I've learned some grounding techniques, I have a better chance at grounding. And yet this is all brand new. So all I can do is just ask anybody who's walking alongside me in this new journey to be patient with me and offer support. I do have a wonderful team of people who are supportive, and I'm so happy to be able to say that I work with Kaya Grossberg. She takes a naturopathic approach to mental health and well-being. She was also labeled early, and she was also put on drugs in the early 90s, like me. She has been extremely supportive and being kind of like my umbrella person who is holding all the little pieces of the pie put together from all the therapists and doctors who I am enrolling in this process. And I love her advice. She has 111 things to try before going on psychiatric drugs on her website, which I think is so great. These things can help me in creating some kind of balance through effectively incorporating them in my life on a regular basis so that these are the things I reach for when I'm having those bad days. And they're just so great. I mean, some of them are just really basic, like, eat less refined sugar, more protein. She offers advice as to which supplements are good, magnesium, vitamin C. She reminds us about meditation and walking on most days and being in time in nature and prayer and journaling and gardening and all these things that just make sense about life. Spending time with friends and not being afraid to spend time alone and tracking your moods and listening to music and things that we have to be reminded of, like allowing all feelings and mental states to exist, like accepting uncertainty and by having self-trust and not giving my full authority away. Listening to my voices. What's in their message? Talk to my loved ones who have passed on without judgment and see the message that they have for me. I'm no longer afraid of my mind, and I know it can change back. At one time, scientists believed that the brain could not heal itself or grow new cells. But today, new research on neurogenesis and neuroplasticity shows that the brain can change. And I believe it can change back to normal, my normal, which is much better than the normal they gave me for 27 years. I look forward to feeling emotions again, to dreaming again. I want more of my creativity back, my empathy, my body, my thinking ability, my memory, my up and down moods, and most of all, my self-determination. They've limited my life based on their theories and their concoctions. Now, I'm taking it back. Knowing that if I share this information openly, I may even help one person will make all the difference to me in the world, because I know that that's what I needed. And I couldn't do it on my own. But now, I'm holding the faith. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.